housework and childcare are the wife's job, right? Making your husband do them means you're failing as a wife. My mother-in-law simply could not accept her son doing housework and childcare. Who do you think provides for the living you're enjoying? Faced with her fury, I couldn't say anything. Don't forget that you owe it all to your husband. You're really ungrateful. I even had to do the laundry. I'm not a maid, you know. My husband, standing beside me, would not try to defend me. If you got divorced, you wouldn't be able to live just with our daughter. Being harshly criticized, I was at my limit with my husband and mother-in-law looking down on me. My name is Kathy, a 30-year-old office worker. I met Steve during college, and we started dating. As we started working and ready to tie the knot, we decided to get married. Soon after, I got pregnant and gave birth. My job had irregular hours, so I switched jobs around the time of the birth. Now, I work full-time with less overtime. I didn't know it then, but after getting married, I realized Steve had a mama's boy streak. Whenever he had to make a decision, he always consulted his mother. I was surprised when he brought his mother along while we were looking for a new house. The living room is spacious and the shopping area is convenient. So shall we settle on this apartment? What do you think, Mom? I was consulting with my husband, yet he wanted his mother's opinion. But the sunlight isn't very good here, and other places might be better.
Yeah.
I thought the same. The room we were to live in seemed to always prioritize his mother's opinion. Eventually, we kept looking and settled on a place that his mother approved of. I liked it too, so I didn't complain, but the feeling of dissatisfaction lingered. Even when buying furniture or appliances, his mother would come along. Hey, I think your mom is busy, why don't we go just the two of us next time? I could not relax with his mother around, and I wanted to make decisions just with my husband. It's fine, Mom isn't busy, and she's helping out. It's better to decide based on her opinion, I think. Subtly hinting that I didn't want his mother to come had no effect on my husband. Occasionally during weekdays, he would say he didn't need dinner and would go to his mother's house to eat. Since I was working, not having to prepare dinner for him was a relief, and I didn't probe too deeply. His mother was happy to have her son visit occasionally. And I didn't want to be seen as a nagging wife or be disliked by my husband or mother-in-law. Years into our marriage, our daughter was growing up. And we started discussing building a new house. My husband was calm and didn't complain when his mother wasn't around. He played with our child. And I wanted to build a new house where the three of us could live peacefully. Mom is getting older, and I'm worried about her future. How about living together? Suddenly, my husband suggested living with his mother. Surely she wanted to live with her son and granddaughter. I was absolutely against living with her. She never listened to my opinions, and I always had to be careful not to upset her. Her son was her pride and joy, and to her, I was just an obstacle. If we lived together, we would have to see each other every day. And I wanted to avoid that at all costs. But, your mom wants to live near her current home, right? Seems so. She has friends there and doesn't want to move too far. I knew she didn't want to leave the area she was familiar with. If we move near your mother's home, it would be too far from my office. Commuting would take twice as long. I wanted to live in a place convenient for commuting and raising children. Hey, this place is close to your mom's house by train. It's also near the station, what do you think? I showed him several land options I had asked a realtor to gather. They were in locations with lots of parks and nature, and shopping was convenient near the station. The fact that it was a short distance to his mother's place clinched his approval. I was relieved that we could avoid living with her. However, she started coming to our house often after that. My husband welcomed her, and I couldn't say no to her visits. While I understood her desire to see her granddaughter, my daughter didn't take to her at all and would always cry when she saw her, making me nervous. I wanted to relax on my days off, but I couldn't rest easy when she visited. Hey, can't we spend weekends just as a family? I always feel like I have to be on my best behavior when your mom is around. Mom is family too. It's you who's making it awkward on your own. My husband did not empathize with my feelings. Whenever she came over, the mother-in-law would say, "This is to educate you as a wife." And she criticized my cooking and housekeeping. If cleaning wasn't done, she would check everything. I was working full-time and trying to clean hard on the weekends, when she would come. And being pointed out by her just before I started cleaning was painful. You really don't have the basics of cooking, do you? You'll never improve like this. Yes. I'm sorry. Even though I cooked earnestly, it never seemed to please her. Yeah. Even the soup is too strong every day, while Mom's soup is always just right. My husband joined her in criticizing me. It was hard to accept that he suddenly became assertive when his mother was around. I decided to talk to him when his mother was not there. Hey, if you have any complaints about me, can't you tell me directly? You don't have to wait for your mom to be around, right? It can't be helped. I just remembered after she said. My husband became sulky and irritable. Even though he meant no harm, as a couple. I wished we could be more supportive of each other, but it was hard to get that across. We began to argue more often about his mother. When our daughter started elementary school, I received a call from my mother saying my father was unwell. My mother was elderly and caregiving was difficult for her alone. So I decided to go back home and help out during breaks from work. During this time, I left our daughter in Steve's care. Our daughter was becoming more independent and even started to help out on her own. She understood that I was having a hard time with the caregiving and tried to cooperate, which was a big help. One day, my mother-in-law came to our house and began to scold me fiercely. What are you thinking? Steve is taking care of everything for the child. I'm sorry, Mother. My father is in poor health, and I need to care for him right now. I believe in helping family when they are in trouble, but it seems she doesn't share that view. Housework and childcare are the wife's duties, right? Making Steve do them means you're failing as a wife. If you want to care so much, do your housework and childcare first. I was left speechless by her fierce demeanor. She simply couldn't accept her own son doing housework and childcare. Who do you think earns the money you live on? Don't forget that you owe it all to Steve. You're really ungrateful. While she scolded me harshly, my husband did not try to defend me. I worked too, so it was not like we lived solely on Steve's salary. But my mother-in-law insisted it was all thanks to him. Last time, I even had to do the laundry. I'm not a housemaid, you know. I had no choice but to ask him for help when I really didn't have the time. And although he helped without complaint then, it seems he had been harboring resentment. Knowing how angry his mother would get, I even wondered if he was saying it on purpose. Afterward, as I was busy with housework, childcare, and caregiving, Steve's treatment of me became even worse. I want to do the housework whenever possible, but when I really can't, I need your help. At least take care of your own things. I asked him to at least clean up after himself if he couldn't take care of our child. What? Isn't that what a wife is for? Why should I have to do it? Are you trying to skip out on the housework? He completely failed to understand my feelings of wanting his cooperation. You earn less than I do, yet you act all high and mighty. You know, if I divorced you, you couldn't live just with our daughter. My salary had decreased when I changed jobs, and now it was lower than Steve's. I had prioritized a job with less overtime because our child was young. Steve began to make unreasonable demands, waving a pre-filled divorce form around. If you really want to do caregiving, clean the house every day until it's spotless before you go. I worked full-time and he knew I couldn't do that, so he said it on purpose. Even if I was tired from overtime, skimping on dinner would not be allowed. Isn't the variety in our meals too small? Don't try to get away with just stir-fry dishes. And I don't eat store-bought ready meals, you know. I was exhausted physically and mentally from being forced to prepare elaborate home-cooked meals. Since then, I started taking our daughter with me when I went back to my parents' house. I no longer expect anything from my demanding husband. I stopped caring much about him and reduced the trouble I took for him. My mother loved my daughter dearly and was always happy when we visited. My daughter loved her grandmother and was always happy to play a lot with her. It's good you come, but are you pushing yourself too hard? Your face looks tired, and I'm worried. My mother quickly noticed something was off. It's okay, Mom. I'm really relieved that you can take care of Emma. I felt guilty for relying so much on my mother. During this time, my father, I had been taking care of, passed away. Amidst the grief, my mother and I discussed the inheritance. As it turned out, my father was wealthy and owned several properties, including the mansion we called home. The house was large enough to be called a mansion, old but well-maintained and still very livable. Originally, my parents lived there together. When my husband first came to greet my parents for our marriage, he was surprised to see the mansion. The area was popular as a vacation spot due to its good transport links. It was a place with a lot of nature and a great view, and my parents were deeply attached to it. Mom, you should continue living in this house, right? I assumed naturally that she would inherit and live there, but her opinion was different. About that, I think this house is too big for just me. Maintaining the mansion would be difficult for my elderly mother. After discussions, it was decided that I would inherit the house, and my mother would move to a conveniently located apartment using the inheritance. After my father's funeral, I stayed at the mansion with my daughter to sort out his belongings and handle the inheritance procedures. I left the shopping to my mother and daughter and worked alone, when suddenly my mother-in-law and husband barged in. What's going on? Why the sudden visit? I hear you inherited this mansion. While saying this, my mother-in-law looked around the mansion curiously. It's spacious enough for all of us to live together comfortably. What? Confused by what she meant, I asked again. We're moving in today. I'll thoroughly train you to be a proper wife to our family. Grinning, my mother-in-law declared this. Training as a wife? I couldn't help but laugh at her words. I stared intently into their eyes and told them. A wife for this family? Who are you talking about? I'm single, you know. Huh? What are you talking about? Confused by my words, the two were puzzled. I've already filed for divorce, so we're strangers now. Too bad, there's no wife left for you to train. Huh? Do you think you can get away with this? When I mentioned the divorce, both of them were shocked, their eyes wide open. They probably never thought I would actually file for divorce. There's nothing to forgive. Steve is the one who wrote the divorce papers first. Don't get cocky, a wife shouldn't oppose her husband. She became agitated and started yelling. In fact, just before my father passed away, I had submitted the divorce papers that my husband had been using to threaten me. Even while I was caring for my father, my husband did not help at all. On the contrary, I had run out of patience with my husband, who made my life miserable. I had been trying to tell him about the divorce, but neither my husband nor my mother-in-law would face me to listen to what I had to say. By the time my father died, I had missed the chance to tell them. My anger with my mother-in-law reached its peak. It's ridiculous to think that just because I'm your daughter-in-law, I should obey everything. A daughter-in-law is not a maid. I didn't care about being disliked by her anymore. I was no longer her daughter-in-law. What did you say? Don't get carried away. My mother-in-law lost her temper and lunged at me, grabbing me. I struggled desperately, but she overpowered me with tremendous strength. Stop. Let me go. You got a divorce on your own? How could you do something so terrible without consulting? Abandoning the son I raised so carefully. She screamed with bloodshot eyes. Hey. Stop her, will you? However, my husband did not try to stop his mother. He was dumbfounded, unable to believe that we were divorced. Realizing that this was more than I could handle alone, I immediately called the police. While I was explaining the situation to the police, my mother-in-law's fury did not subside. Please calm down. As the police tried to restrain her, my mother-in-law suddenly shook off their grip. What are you doing? Let go of me. Her flailing hand hit the face of a police officer, and she was subdued. Given the danger, she was taken to the police station. As she was taken away in a police car, my husband just stood there, stunned. I will claim damages for the mental anguish I've suffered. I've documented everything. What are you talking about? My husband was at a loss for words. Without his mother, he was helpless. Obviously, I will have custody of Emma, so you'll be paying child support every month. Without his mother to support him, my husband just hung his head. Sometime later, my ex-husband came to my workplace. Apparently, through a mutual acquaintance from our university days. Bad rumors about him had spread at his workplace. Heard his wife ran away from him. Sounds like a mother-in-law issue, poor woman. The stares from people at the company made him uncomfortable, and he resigned. His hair was unkempt, his beard grown out, and he looked untidy. I learned that due to stress, he had fallen into gambling and was financially struggling. Moreover, it seemed that his mother had always been addicted to slots. And his earnings from the new job were barely enough to get by. It's really inconvenient when you come to my workplace. But you hardly ever respond when I contact you. I wanted nothing more to do with my ex-husband or his mother. Please, can you reduce the child support? It's been really tough financially lately. The amount of child support was agreed upon by both of us. You said you wanted to do everything you could as a father. My ex-husband clicked his tongue and glared at me unhappily. It can't be helped when the situation has changed. The pay at the new job is low, and the bonus is minimal. From my point of view, if he hadn't gambled, he could afford to pay child support. But my ex-husband was trying to reduce the amount. I was disappointed at his lack of responsibility as a father. You know, it must be tough on just your salary. Let's try again. The suggestion to remarry just because he was struggling with money was utterly disappointing to me. It irritated me that he could say it as if he were being kind. What? Who would remarry you? I'm absolutely done with mama's boys. What did you say? My ex-husband, who had no awareness of being a mama's boy, reacted violently to my comment. You can't decide anything without your mom, can you? The house, furniture, appliances, you consulted her about everything, didn't you? It's not like everything. Even as he objected, I had a lot more to say. Oh, and I know you went shopping with your mom to pick out your clothes. That's what people call a mama's boy. Ugh. Hit the mark, my ex-husband was visibly frustrated. He might think of himself as a filial son, but to me, he was just a mama's boy who couldn't decide anything by himself. You always mocked me for my low salary, but I won't let you say that anymore. What do you mean? After changing jobs, I was appreciated for my diligent work and managed to get promoted. I got promoted. Now I earn more than you do. What are you talking about? There's no way you earn more than I do. He refused to believe what I was saying. He always boasted about his higher salary and mocked me. He never imagined that his belittled wife could earn more than him. I don't need you to believe it. I can show you the pay stubs anytime. Faced with my confident response, he fell silent. Besides, I had inherited some assets, so I was living comfortably without him. Now, I don't have to be forced to do household chores. And I no longer have to deal with a nagging mother-in-law, which is very comfortable. Well, then, share the mansion you inherited and other properties with me. I should have rights to half of them. My presumptuous ex-husband needed an explanation. You see, inherited properties aren't considered marital property. Sorry, but you have no rights to them. Damn it. It's all your fault for filing for divorce on your own. I did nothing wrong. It seemed he still hadn't accepted the divorce. If you did nothing wrong, we wouldn't be divorced. Did you help me at all when I was busy caring for my father? You did nothing. That's because you didn't manage the household chores properly. I would have done the housework if I could. Spouses are supposed to help each other when times are tough. Realizing that he had no intention of supporting me as a spouse, my love for him cooled. He wouldn't understand how it feels to be most in need and not get any help. It's unreasonable for me to work the same hours and still be the only one handling housework and childcare. What? Housework and childcare are a wife's duty. It's wrong of you to push that onto your husband. My ex-husband was yelling, conveniently forgetting all he had done. No matter how much I explained, his mindset wouldn't change. It must be the influence of his mother from his childhood. My ex-husband, who made a scene in front of the company, was taken away by security. Later on, my ex-husband and his mother found themselves in a tough financial situation and had to sell their family home. They moved to a rundown apartment and somehow managed to pay child support while struggling. However, both of them couldn't quit gambling, so their lives were quite difficult. As for me, I'm busy with work and, with my mother's help, I am happily living with my daughter. I can tell that I smile much more now, which makes my daughter happy too. Before, my days were spent watching the moods and facial expressions of my ex-husband and mother-in-law. But now, I want to show my daughter how to live life in our own way. From now on, I must raise my daughter by myself. The situation with my ex-husband has made me acutely aware of the importance of parental education. I want to teach my daughter to care for others and to help those in need. No matter how tough it gets, I've decided to face it with a smile.